Welcome to Enhanced Impact. I'm Felicia, a seasoned data scientist with a rich background having worked for Microsoft, the CDC, and other industry leaders. I've gathered practical, real world insights on leveraging data to add tangible business value, and I want to share that with you. Today's video is part of a series merging data science with software development. I hope that you like the video. If you do, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, it gives me great motivation to continue to make content. And without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to this lesson on environments, environment variables, and keeping password secrets safe with Python using .env files. Today we're going to cover what exactly environment variables are, the different types of environment variables, how environments are used in application development, examples of use cases for these environment variables. We're going to access Windows environment variables using the command line, as well as from the Advanced Settings tab. We'll create .env files and use Python to access those environment variables. And the lesson will finish with an example of showing how to use environment variables to pull data from an API. What is an environment? An environment is a specific configuration of hardware, operating system information, packages and their versions, and security settings that software applications rely on to operate correctly. Environment variables store changing information. It's dynamic data that could change or shift during the execution of a program based on who's using the environment, what environment they're actually in, and so forth. Data scientists work on raw customer use data to develop predictive models and ML capabilities for analysis of the data collected by software. Data scientists and software engineers wrap these data science solutions up into applications. The development, testing, and production of these applications occur in different environments, hence our need for environment variables. The software is often made up of code modules designed to extract incoming customer data, to transform that data with analytic strategies, and to load the outcome of this transformed data into reports, other applications, databases, dashboards, etc. And that happens in the development environment. The development environment is a bunch of people working on separate stations and pushing their code together to actually create an application. The application is tested individually by each of the modules, and once that's done, the full application goes to a testing environment to test different data scenarios or possibilities to guarantee user acceptance of the output returned from the application. Some testing environments you'll hear people talk about are BAT, CIT, UAT. Once the bugs are fixed, that application is then connected to the larger system that the business might have in place, like other applications and different databases. And in the staging environment, this application is put in an environment, they call it staging, which is essentially a copy of the production environment. And real anonymized data that will actually come into the system is brought in and tested against the application to see if there's any issues between the connections of the application. And so that's what happens in the staging environment. Once that's complete and the testing has been given a thumbs up, the application is then pushed live. So that's that part of it. There are two major environment variables: system environment variables and user-defined environment variables. The system environment variables, they work for anyone who's actually on the system. So for example, if you have a computer like I do at my home and we have multiple users on the computer, everything else works the same. But what is different is the variables that are specific to the user. For example, I have a password and username, and different people have different passwords and usernames to access the same system. So that's the difference between the system environment variable, same operating system, same file structure, but for the user-defined environment variable, different username, different password. Using environment variables are important in software development and deployment of machine learning or data science models is because it limits the need to modify and re-release an application due to changes in the configuration of the data. So that's why it's important that these environment variables are kept outside of the code that's used to create the application, so that if there are any changes to the username, you bring a new person on to access the environment of the application, then there is no need to go into the code and like refactor the software. You can just essentially just change the environment variables outside. Use cases for environment variables, I mentioned some, like username, domain name, and for holding secrets like passwords. Also execution mode, basically the environment, if it's development, staging, production, and configuration of operating system and so forth. To maintain secrets, to keep the passwords, API keys, and things safe, there are different ways of doing that. You can use a dedicated secrets management solution like AWS Secrets Manager, as well as Azure Key Vault, and others. You can also have, if you're working in Kubernetes and Docker Swarm and a few other container orchestration systems, they have built-in support for secrets management. You can use these tools to manage secrets and inject them into containers securely. And those secrets are also still often kept outside of the code. They're not going to be inside of the modules that make up the application. Environment variables is a topic of today's video, and these are external files. We're going to use these external files to store sensitive data. And these files can be .env files, JSON files, other configurations, .yaml files. It's very important that when you use external files like these, that you don't commit them to your version control. Let's take a look at some Windows environment variables, how we're going to access those. We can access them from the command line, as well as using the advanced settings. So if I go to my search bar, type in command to get to the command prompt, click in there, and all I have to do is type the word set. And set brings up the environment variables. Here, I have username equals frwil. That's what an environment variable is. No spaces between the key and the value. Here, my key is username, and the value is frwil. And the only thing that separates those two is the equal sign. Let's take a look at our settings. Go to Advanced System Settings. And in the System Properties dialog, there are several tabs. Click on the Advanced tab, down to the Environment Variables, and you'll see the two environment variable types that are inside Windows, the user-defined environment variables and the system variables. Be very, very, very careful. Don't edit or delete your system variables, because that will impact how your computer functions. We're not going to be creating environment variables here. We're going to have some external files that we're going to use, a .env file. I have a folder that I created for this lesson on environment variables, and I want to go to this folder, environment variable create print. We're going to print the environment variables to basically as a proof of concept to prove that even though the environment variables are not within the code, that we can still access them from an external .env file. So I'm going to get in here and create a .env file. I'm going to call it sample.env. When I do, you'll notice that this cog wiggle shows up to let you know that this is a configuration file. User name equals foo. Email equals foo underscore example dot org. That's it. We've created our .env file, and now I want to call this .env file in from a Python script. So here, let's create another file. We're going to call it print underscore env underscore var dot py. You need the OS package and the .env packages to access these environment variables. So we're going to import OS from .env, import load .env. pip install.env. I have it already installed on my computer, but it's not a default package. We need to have the path to the environment. Okay. And so I'm going to create a variable called env path is equal to the path. To access my path for the sample.env, I'm going to go here and copy the path, put parentheses there, Control V. In Python, is the backslashes sometimes will give you an error, so you need to convert these to forward slashes. You get a UTF error. You can get around it, but it's just easier to make the change here. I think it's the last one. There we go. It's a long path. Right. So here, you're going to load the environment variable file. Right. And so that is our load _.env, and you're going to put in your the path to your environment variable file, or sample.env. We're going to get our username and password. This is how we're actually going to access or pull in the values, the actual email address, the actual username. So for example, we just say, hey, username equals os.get _env. You need the quotation marks here. So user name, this is email. Email is equal to os.get env. Email. And here's the proof of concept. It's a proof that you can access the values or data or secrets without exposing it. For security. Okay. Get the username, print email, and I'm going to run it. To run it, I could run it from the command line, but I'm going to run it here. %. Okay, and just go ahead and run it. Okay, and that's it. So that shows you, hey, we can pull in and see the username and the email. Okay. I have another file that I created earlier to pull data in using an environment variable. I have an API request, and my environment file is here. I'm not going to expose it because I have my credentials actually in it. But this is the API request. Here I'm using the packages OS request to access the API, pandas because I'm actually taking the API request and putting it in a CSV file, and of course our load.env to load our data or values from the environment variables into this application or into the script. So here again, load.env. In this situation, I didn't create a separate variable, which I should have, for the path. But that's what this is. This is the path to the environment file or .env file. Here I have os.get API key, os.get env host. These are the keys to that are inside of that .env file. And this is just some script that says, hey, if it's not an API key, print that it's not one. Otherwise, go to the website, which is US Realtor at rapidapi.com. This is where I'm accessing realtor information for New York, and I'm going to limit the output to just 100 records. These are the headers that are required, which is the API key and the host, and that's what we're going to get from here. So this is the request that's going to happen. So I have request.get the URL, which is this here, the headers, which is this information here, and the query string, which is, hey, I want New York and want to limit to 100 records. If the response is okay, then we're good to go. He'll let us know if it's not. And then I'm normalizing the data, because the data is going to come in some sort of data list, and I'm going to export it out to a CSV. And the CSV file is going to be called API_data.csv, which is here. All right. That's it. I'm going to run the code. And look over here. Now you notice over here that there aren't any CSV files. It's just Python files here. And then, of course, this configuration file, which is a .env file that has the keywords, the API key, and value pair, which is in here. Okay, so I run it below. There's the CSV file. Data saved API_data, the CSV. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you very much. Before we leave, I do want to show you that if you are using external files, definitely check out GitHub's documentation on how to add the files to gitignore, because you don't want to publish your secrets, your usernames, your passwords, any other credentials to GitHub. So we can do this. Click here, so I'll let you take a look at it really quickly. So here, this is the GitHub docs, ignoring files, and how to configure those get to ignore files you don't want to check into GitHub. Okay, you can then push your code and everything else, but you don't want to push the .env files. Okay, so that's it. That's how you keep your secrets safe. Thank you for watching the video today. If you enjoyed it, definitely give me a thumbs up, a like, subscribe. Until next time, take care.